Estamos en Barcelona con Tomi Adeyemi, haciendo la entrevista para la Lit Con Madrid. Es la autora de Hijos, sangre y hueso, que es la nueva propuesta de editorial Molino, parte de toda la editorial de RBA. Ayer estuvo firmando en Barcelona y vamos a hacer una pequeña entrevista con ella, dado que no puede estar con nosotros en la Feria del Libro de Madrid. Esta es la segunda mejor cosa que podemos hacer. So, hi Tom.
Hola.
Do you speak a little bit of Spanish, right?
A little bit. It's embarrassing to me because I want to speak more. I want to speak it fluently.
Yeah, but you are fluent in Portuguese at least, or
no.
No,
I'm just a dumb American.
Okay. So tell us a little about yourself. Like,
yeah.
you studied in Harvard.
Yeah.
And go.
Okay, so yeah, I've been writing my entire life. It's funny because when I was era niño, it was like one of the first things I ever did, and I've just always loved stories, and I've always loved putting them together, but I didn't tell people I wrote stories. Honestly, people were surprised when this book deal stuff happened because like I didn't tell anyone I wrote until I was 21, and even then it was like 3 people. So everyone was like, wait, you write? What's going on? So I've always done it alone. But when I went to Harvard, I studied English literature. And a lot of people think they're like, oh, that's how you learned. Like, no, because we were reading like The Great Gatsby and The Sound and the Fury. But I got to take some classes which were about young adult literature and young adult fantasy, which were really wonderful. And I also learned about African American literature for the first time. And so I was reading people like W.E.B. Du Bois, and there were these really like seminal Black authors that we have, and it was crazy because they were writing maybe right after emancipation. So they were writing things like 200 years ago, 100 years ago, but it felt like they were writing about today, which was both sad because there were so many problems and there's still so many problems, but it also showed me the power of literature. Because if you write it in the right way, then anyone can understand it. It doesn't matter if it's 200 years ago. It doesn't matter if you live in Spain, if you live in America. So that, I would say, was the most influential thing for my education. And then I ended up in Brazil after I graduated, and it was a 2-week like travel fellowship, and I went there to study their history of the slave trade. But the museum that I wanted to go to, that was going to be all of my research, it was closed. It was closed for renovations. And, you know, I only speak like a little Spanish. They speak Portuguese. So I'm trying to explain in broken Spanish. I was like, necesito, like, ir en el museo. And they're just like, no puede. And I'm like, and I was just like, oh my God. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, I need to give the money back because my proposal is like, I'm going to this museum and I'm going to learn. But I ended up in a gift shop, and that's where I discovered the Orisha. And when I saw them, I was like, what is this magical, like, they look like African gods and goddesses. And then I discovered that they weren't only African, but they were West African, they were Nigerian, and I'm Nigerian. So I knew then and there that I wanted to create a story with them. And create something where they were going to be the foundation for the magic of the world. And then a couple months later, I got the inspiration for the characters. So like the world came first, and then the characters came. And then I realized that with this book, well, someone helped me realize, my boyfriend helped me realize, because I was like, oh, I want to write this book about the Black experience, but I was like, I also want to write this African fantasy. And I'm like, which book should I do first? And he's like, I think it's the same book. And now we have Hijos, de sangre y hueso. So it's all in one. It's the African magic. It's this big fantasy, but it also says a lot about what it feels like to be Black in America right now.
And you talked about your boyfriend's support.
Yeah.
And I've heard that your family, especially your father, also helped a lot. How many times did your father read the book?
So I didn't know until we were in an interview that he had read it that many times. He's read it like 16 times. Yeah. And I thought he read it like 3 times or something. He also read different versions because this book changed a lot.
Because the editing process was like hectic. How many months did you have?
Well, the thing, so from opening the blank page of the first draft to turning in the final draft, which is maybe draft 40, from draft 1 to draft 40 was like a year and a half.
So like 18 months for the whole process.
It was like the first draft took a month. Then for the next 17 months, I was rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. So the story has changed a lot, and it was always changing for the better. You know, always like, oh, the world makes more sense. Oh, this character journey is now like fully realized it. Oh, you know what? I thought the magic system should be like this, but it should be like this. Oh, there's 50 pages in the middle. Take that out. Smush it together. So it was like all of this stuff. So I knew he had read it like three times, and I thought it was 3 different versions, but he's read this version like 14 times.
So we've been talking about the world, about the Orisha, about the magic, about the Nigerian culture, about how you wanted so many, all the characters to be black people because there was not enough representation. And how do you think, from where do you got to that idea? I mean,
yeah, so it was, and yes, that was just, it was kind of like, this book was sort of a convergence of all these different areas in my life. So in my personal life, I was working at a job I wasn't happy with. And so every night I was like trying really hard on the first book I tried to get published. This is the second book. So the first book didn't go anywhere, but for like 6 months, like I would get off around 6 p.m. and then from like 6 to 10 p.m., 6 to 11, 6 to midnight, I would be working on the first book. And I told myself, like, oh, you just want to publish a book one day. That's why. But then after like 6 months of working, like, so basically 2 jobs, I realized I was working so hard because I wanted to be a writer. And I wanted someone to pick up that book and say, hey, what you're doing at night, you can do during the day too. It doesn't happen like that. But by going through that process, I finally had to be honest that I wanted to write. I also learned about publishing, and I learned what it takes to publish. I also learned about like readers. You know, my first book didn't work because I was writing for readers 10 years ago. I started reading what was popular today, and I was just like, whoa. You know, it was amazing. And I'm like, I tell people, for me, it was like learning that you could get book 7 in book 1. And you can just have the full world and the full adventure and the characters and the epic battles, and that could be your first book.
Talking about the things that are read today, I've heard that you do not like high fantasy, like in The Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones.
So it's because I have to be, because people hear that, they're like, burner! No. Yeah, like those are the classics. For me, like I'm a huge Potterhead. I love Harry Potter. For Lord of the Rings, it just doesn't do it for me. I just can't get through it because it's all these like short men running around and like then they're like having tea, and I was just like, I don't want to see that. I need more. And with Game of the Thrones, I haven't gotten into it yet because I wanted to read the books first. But I'm a slow reader and I have no time. So
you work 2 jobs and
so that's why I kept being like, oh, I'll do it when I'll do this, and now I'm like, okay, probably when the series is over, I'll get into it because a lot of writers I love it, and so I know it's. But yeah, for me, it's just I like my any story if it has magic or sci-fi. I like it to be deeply human. So when there's so many creatures, or when a random fairy comes in and now everyone can fly, it's too much for me because I'm like it's too unbelievable. But I was like, you can do the craziest magic, but you have to make it really human. Which is why I think a lot of readers they're like, I don't actually like fantasy, but I like your book. And I was like, well, that's because you're reading about humans. Maybe they're doing magic, maybe they're riding on a lion, but it's like when Zaylee and Zane are fighting in a forest, that's like when you fight with your brother in a forest. You know, it's the human element.
But even if you don't have like those pillars of the genre, you do have your influences from Avatar, The Last Airbender, and The Note, and Shingeki no Kyojin.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's why I'm such a big fan of anime, is because crazy. The worlds they're in are crazy. Like even with like Attack on Titan, I was like literally giant skinless humans are like eating other humans. You know, it's as crazy as it can get. Yet most of the episodes are like just inside the character's head. So that show is mostly about what it feels like to live in a society where you're facing the end of humanity. You know, it's deeply internal. And then you just happen to have a crazy giant monster too. So that's how I like to do it. I like to keep it really internal. But yeah, and with Avatar: The Last Airbender, I just think it's the greatest thing ever made, ever. Like, not just an anime or an animation, like, I think it's the greatest story ever told. So
we won't get into the Legend of Korra yet.
Yeah. It's funny too, because you watch it, I go back to these stories as writers, and it blows my mind more. And that was always my inspiration, because when we watched it, I don't know if you watched it when you were young, so it's just this incredible adventure. When you watch it as an adult, they're dealing with genocide. You know, they're dealing with warfare.
Fascism.
They're dealing, with like fascism, with it's even forms of racism, with it's like the military and how that works in different environments. So much complexity with good and evil and leading. It's brilliant. And you don't. But when you're watching when you're young, you're like, this is amazing. You're like, this is just an amazing story. And now I watch it and I'm like sobbing, and I'm like, it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
I think most of the things that are in the when I read other interviews about you, and I had already finished the book by the time. And when I read for the first time that one of your inspirations was Avatar: The Last Airbender, I saw so many things on both works. And I said, how did I not see this?
It's funny too, because for me the very clear thing, I recently saw a fan post where they're like, Tomi says she's influenced by Avatar: The Last Airbender. And it was like drawing all these things, and like it started going into things that like aren't actual parallels. It started making them, but it was funny to see. For me, the easy one is just like Appa and Nyla. Nyla is my Appa. I was like, there's nothing better than a giant. I was like, if my lion flies, that's too much for me. I was like, it looks fine in animation,
but you need a giant beast to
I was like, I need my giant beast. They can't fly. That's a little, if you picture Nyla flying, it's like, okay, that's a little weird. But there's that. But then also, just that epic. The thing I wanted most was for readers to feel the way I feel when I'm watching Avatar, because you're in this whole other universe. And you're like, when people are like, what book would you want to be in? I'm like, Avatar. I was like, maybe. I was like, if I have to pick a book, Harry Potter, but I was like, they actually have to do a lot of drama. With the Avatar world, I could go to Kyoshi Island, I could relax, I could learn some fighting. So that was the thing. I wanted that epic adventure in a world that felt so fully realized.
It's not that common for a Western author, but well, technically Avatar is a Western job. Saying that you have references from anime and Oriental culture, it's not that common. But we've talked a lot about your creative process, about where most of your work came from. Basically, because this book has just came out last month it was the 6th of March in the USA. And the 12th here in Spain, and you have already been the #1 in the New York Times, I think. Just as the signing was a lot of people for having a book only 10 days ago.
I was so surprised.
But the thing is, many people don't know you yet. Well, not that many. They will come to know in no time. But if you had to explain this book in general lines to someone who has never read about it or heard about it, how will you explain it?
So I have a couple different ways to explain it, and it depends on the audience. So I'll just go through all three.
Okay.
So the fastest way to explain it is Black Panther with magic. Just because it's funny, when I was writing this story, there was nothing like it at all. So it's become easier for people to place it because of the success of Black Panther. So it's like Black Panther with magic, where Black Panther was futuristic and sci-fi of like imagining of Africa. This is the fantasy or historical magical reimagining. And then the first way I always pitched it was African: The Last Airbender, because if anyone, people who love Avatar, they instantly get it, and that is really where I was writing from. I was like, that is what I wanted to achieve. And then my general one for people who aren't familiar with either is just this epic West African adventure about a girl fighting to bring magic back to her people. And it's it's a breath of fresh air for people who love fantasy and even for people who don't, because you're in a new setting, you're in a new world. You know, they're racing a giant lion through the jungle, you know, they're roaming through deserts, there's these African gods and goddesses, and there's magic that you've never seen before. So yeah, those are my sort of three. Between one of the three, usually I can help people understand what the book is.
And it has a lot of tropes of the young adult genre, even if it's not exactly a young adult genre, being all of those topics that you touch, police violence, racism, even forms of fascism.
Yeah.
But it does have strong feminine protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It does have different magic types you can relate yourself to, like the burners and the tigers and the connectors. You do have a test on your webpage to say which one are you.
Yeah, I spent so many hours on that test.
You did yourself?
8 hours. Yeah, because I wanted, you know, I think the reason we love Harry Potter so much is because we know where we fit in it. And then there's even the other debate, because a lot of times we still don't see people of color in it, but like you at least know, like when I started this book, I was Ravenclaw. I took it again a month ago, now I'm Slytherin. So I think it's because I'm so mean to my characters.
Well, there are points in the room.
Yeah. But it's like, I think just we love knowing where we fit in something we love. So I was like, no one, well, actually, let me not say no one loves this book more than me, because I've met some very passionate fans.
Yes.
But I was like, you know, I love it very much, and so I knew I could find a way to see where does everyone fit in this, and so not just like I like fire, I'm a burner, but like what does it mean to be a burner? So yeah, no, I spent a lot of time. I was testing people, and then like editing the quiz. Yeah, I actually loved it. It was really fun.
We've talked before that the signing yesterday was a huge success even in Spain. How are you living all of the way the book is fitting into the United States literature and worldwide?
It's honestly, someone's like, how are you processing? I was like, I can't understand it. I can't understand it. Literally, some of my DMs, people are like, why didn't you tell us you were coming to Barcelona? Because I've been bad about updating my events page, and I kind of just like, you know, I feel like I talk to people most directly through Instagram, so I was just like, by the way, I'm in Barcelona today, like, come say hi, I'm excited to, like, muy emocionada, encontrarte, and people were like, what, I would have hopped on a plane if I'd known you were going to be in, or they were like, no, you know, I was so surprised, because I was like, wait, you want to meet me? Or like, you're excited, even when I landed in Amsterdam, and I'm like, in Amsterdam, because I didn't really like announce it, and people were like, what are you doing here? Like, where can I see? And I was just like, so it's so crazy to me that people are excited especially in these amazing like international territories. And with yesterday, I was like, the book's been out for 10 days. So if 2 people show up, like that's gonna be line. Yeah, and even afterwards, my boyfriend was like, you don't realize how big that line was. He's like, all of those people were, he was describing the setup, because also when you're sitting there, you can kind of see 3 people deep. So you're always like, oh, there's 3 people, that's nice. I was like, oh, there's 3 consistent people. That's nice. And he's like, no, it was this
whole, went through the car.
He was like, there was 2 lanes for people to walk through. And I was like, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. And even I was saying, I want to get one to take home, yes. To help me practice my Spanish, because I can I was able to, like, I know enough Spanish that I can figure out where people were. And I was like, oh, this will be really good to read. And I was like, oh my God, if there's an audiobook one day, that would be great. And then I was like, wait, my book is in Spanish. My book is in Spanish. Like, when I was in school, we would read like Don Quixote to help us practice Spanish. And I was like, I can read my own book to practice. I was like, well, what is this? But then I was really tired. And I was getting sick. So I was like, just go to bed, figure it out tomorrow. So.
And we know that even with the big success, it's right now, right out of the gate, there are future plans for the saga. Yeah. It has a big trajectory into the future, because basically, this is the first book of a trilogy. Mm-hmm. How do you plan to, and second, it's a movie coming out, but first, the trilogy, how do you see yourself doing the other 2 parts of it?
Yeah, so it's great now, because I'm working on the second draft of book 2, and like the story is done.
The second draft? Of book 2?
Yeah, the second draft.
Okay, so
yeah,
we
and so
already
some
have one
people,
draft.
yeah, so the first draft I wanted to get out before the first book got out, just because from the beginning, I knew book 1 very well. Book 1 kind of exploded out of me. Book 3, I also knew very clearly what it was going to be. Book 2, I was like, what happened? And I didn't have time to figure it out though, because like I said, it was 18 crazy months. I turned in the final book of this like end of December for it to come out in March. And so I had like 1 week off, and then January I started thinking about book 2. So February I wrote the first draft, and right now I'm working on the second draft. And people were like, is he gonna take 40 drafts? And I was like, I don't think so, because I'm a better writer than I was. And also I'm working with my US editor, like from the beginning now. Before it's like, I write the book, and then I go with my agent and I work on the book, and then my editor and I work. So there's kind of like 3 very different versions where as she can give her insight immediately and be like, no, you can't have that character. And I was like, okay, that saves me 50 pages. So I think I'm hoping for like 20 drafts. We'll see.
There's still a lot of drafts.
Yeah, but the thing is, the second draft is the hardest, because that's when it goes from nonsense to a story that like someone could read. Well, someone has to read, my editor has to read. So that's when it goes from like, okay, I know what happens here to I need to make it happen here on the page. So I think like when I get past the second draft, I'll feel pretty good, because then it's just make it better, make it better, make it better.
But you already have the framework to just...
Yeah, I know the story, and I know book 3. It's like, I feel like this is why I think I'm a swimmer
so much
now.
at least for us that we don't even have half a draft of the second book, and you already have, I know the third one, of course you do, you're the author, Jesus.
And that's why it's like, I see my green scarf, because it's like in my head, and I was like, I know where it's going. Because people were like, what happens, who's this? And so it's fun having like a secret from the world.
and so many people wanted to know the secret.
Yeah. It's really exciting.
Talking about secrets, there is this movie, you already have a movie deal.
Yeah.
You had a movie deal since the summer, I think.
Yeah, or it's on the book deal happened, and then like 3 days later, the movie deal. So they've been like excited from the beginning, which is crazy.
The first time we in Madrid, a bunch of people that are now in the Lit Con heard about you is because Romina Russell yes, she was there doing a meetup with readers, and she could not stand the thought of not telling us about her friend who had already had her movie deal, and that was gonna be such a huge success.
Oh, I'm gonna text her. It's funny because we've been texting. She's like, have fun in Barcelona. I love Romina, and I love the Zodiac series.
She was so happy to say that a friend of her was gonna have this huge success with a movie deal and with everything. And we actually wanted to have you in the book fair, but we don't think it's gonna be possible.
Yeah.
So this is the second best thing that we can have with you.
Yeah.
But given that you can come to us, we did bring you a little thing, just in case we will have given it to you, like a stuffed t-shirt with you. So you can keep it. We will have given it to you if you could came, but you could not. So
gracias.
We brought it to you.
I love that. Okay, I'm gonna write in this and I'm gonna tag you guys. I love that. That means so much. I want to come to Madrid. I haven't been. This is my second time in Barcelona.
Yeah, but you have so many tours to do. The book is still fresh. You have to be in so many places that we totally understand, and that's why we are doing this.
Oh, thank you.
We thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Entonces esta fue la entrevista con Tomi Adeyemi. Espero que os haya gustado y esperamos verlos en los próximos días en la Lit Con de Madrid. Muchísimas gracias.
Adiós.